JFK and the Unspeakable: Why He Died and Why It Matters, by James W. Douglas. Narrated by Pete Larkin. Copyright 2008 by James W. Douglas. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Orbis Books and was produced in the year 2011 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Preface. We can know the essential truth of President John F. Kennedy's assassination. That truth can set us free. Thanks to the pioneer investigators into President Kennedy's murder, the truth-telling of many witnesses, and a recent flood of documents through the JFK Records Act, the truth is available. Not only can the conspiracy that most Americans have thought was likely now be seen in detail, not only can we know what happened in Dallas. More important than filling in the crime scene, we can know the larger historical context of the assassination, why President Kennedy was murdered. We can know the liberating truth. The story of why JFK was gunned down is the subject of this book. I have told the story thematically and chronologically, point by point through a sea of witnesses. In brief, that story is: on our behalf, at the height of the Cold War, John F. Kennedy risked committing the greatest crime in history, starting a nuclear war. Before we knew it, he turned toward peace with the enemy who almost committed that crime with him. For turning to peace with his enemy, and ours, Kennedy was murdered by a power we cannot easily describe. Its unspeakable reality can be traced, suggested, recognized, and pondered. That is one purpose of this book. The other is to describe Kennedy's turning. I hope that by following the story of JFK's encounter with the unspeakable, we will be willing to encounter it too. John Kennedy's story is our story, although a titanic effort has been made to keep it from us. That story, like the struggle it embodies, is as current today as it was in 1963. The theology of redemptive violence still reigns. The Cold War has been followed by its twin, the War on Terror. We are engaged in another apocalyptic struggle against an enemy seen as absolute evil. Terrorism has replaced communism as the enemy. We are told we can be safe only through the threat of escalating violence. Once again, anything goes in a fight against evil. Preemptive attacks, torture, undermining governments, assassinations. Whatever it takes to gain the end victory over an enemy portrayed as irredeemably evil. Yet the redemptive means John Kennedy turned to in a similar struggle was dialogue with the enemy. When the enemy is seen as human, everything changes. That reconciling method of dialogue, where mutual respect overcomes fear, and thus war, is again regarded as heretical in our dominant political theology. As a result, seeking truth in our opponents instead of victory over them can lead, as it did in the case of Kennedy, to one's isolation and death as a traitor. That ultimate crown is, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, the cost of discipleship. There is no better reason for it than loving one's enemies. Not a sentimental love, but first of all, respect. Respect means recognizing and acknowledging our enemies part of the truth, whether or not that makes life more difficult for us. Recognizing his enemies' truths made life much more difficult and finally impossible for Kennedy, leaving us with the responsibility of recognizing the painfully obvious truth of Kennedy's death. As recent polls indicate, 3 out of 4 Americans believe Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. The evidence has long pointed toward our own government. Yet with recurrent defenses of the Warren Commission, conjectures of mob plots, and attacks on Kennedy's character, we in this media-drenched society drink the waters of uncertainty. We believe we cannot know, a truth whose basic evidence has been present since the work of the Warren Commission's earliest critics. Could there be a deeper reason for our reluctance to know the truth? Is our wariness of the truth of JFK's assassination rooted in our fear of truth's consequences, to him and to us? For President Kennedy, a deepening commitment to dialogue with our enemies proved fatal. If we are unwilling as citizens to deal with...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.